The first thing I remember is the heat. Not the warmth of a pleasant July day, but the heavy shimmering kind that hangs above concrete and turns every breath into something dense. I could feel it pressing on my skin as I tried to angle my wheelchair toward the side gate of my aunt's backyard, hoping I could slip out before Logan noticed me. I had been there less than 15 minutes and already felt the familiar uneasiness crawling up my spine. The music thumped from two portable speakers near the grill, classic country songs that everyone except me seemed to enjoy. The smell of ribs and charcoal drifted through the air. Relatives I had not seen in months chatted in loose clusters beneath the few patches of shade. Kids ran past with plastic water guns, and there I was gripping my wheels, trying to disappear. I almost made it. Almost, until I heard Logan's voice slice through the air. "You are walking just fine when you want to." The laughter that followed came fast, loud, and eager. A few cousins turned with amused smirks, phones already half raised, as if the entire family reunion was nothing more than entertainment for their social feeds. I stopped moving. My throat tightened. Logan strode toward me with the confident swagger he had perfected since high school, beer in hand, sunglasses perched on his head, that look on his face that said he was ready to perform. He circled behind me, exaggerated his steps, then leaned down so the crowd could hear. "Come on, Liv. You were strolling around your apartment last month, Mom told me. Why are you using that chair now?" The words stung even though I had heard versions of them for more than a year. I opened my mouth to explain that standing for longer than 3 minutes sent sharp electric pain down my right leg, but I knew it would not matter. Not to Logan, not to the people already filming. I tried again to turn the wheelchair toward the gate, but the ground was uneven and my hands trembled. The noise around me swelled as more relatives gathered, drawn by the promise of drama. I could hear snippets. "She is doing this again. Poor Donna." I knew she exaggerated everything. Someone joked that maybe I just wanted attention. The words mixed with the music and the heat until my chest tightened. I pressed my palms harder against the rims, trying desperately to push forward. That was when he appeared. My father, Eric Harper, 62 years old, broad shoulders, graying hair, and eyes that had always hardened whenever he looked at me since the accident. I could smell the bourbon before he even reached me. The bottle was not in his hand, but the scent clung to his breath, to his shirt, to the way he moved. His steps were heavy. His expression was carved from stone. "Enough with the drama, Olivia. Stand up!" His voice carried across the yard, powered by a mixture of anger and pride. Conversations halted, heads turned. Even Logan straightened, sensing that our father was about to take center stage. "Dad, please. My balance is not good today." My voice came out thin and hoarse. I tried to steady myself to keep my breathing even, but the panic was rising. I wanted him to calm down. I wanted him to see me. But I also knew he never listened when he had made up his mind. He moved closer until he towered over me. For a moment, I thought he might lean down and check if I was all right the way fathers in movies do. But then his hand shot toward the wheelchair. Not toward me, toward the left armrest. His fingers curled as if he meant to grab it, but instead, his palm struck the metal with a sharp, ringing impact. A sudden jolt shot through the frame. The entire chair lurched to the right. One wheel lifted, the ground shifted beneath me, my breath caught in my throat, then everything tilting. I felt my shoulder hit first, scraping against the concrete, then my hip, then the side of my head. A burst of white light filled my vision. The sound of laughter erupted again, louder this time, blending with a few shocked gasps. Phones recorded from multiple angles. Logan let out a short bark of amusement. My father's straightened, chest-heaving face read. "See? She is faking it. If she really could not walk, she would be in a hospital bed, not lounging in that chair." His words struck harder than the fall. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the spinning colors around the edges of my vision. Dust clung to my palms. My heart pounded so violently I could feel it in my throat. I tried to push myself up, but my right arm trembled uncontrollably. The pain in my lower back flared sharp and unforgiving. A few relatives backed away as if my pain were contagious. Others stayed rooted, staring, unsure whether to laugh or pretend concern. Music still played. Kids still ran. The world kept moving even as mine tipped sideways. Then, something shifted in the crowd. A quiet ripple. People turned their heads, and that was when I saw him. A man standing behind the cluster of relatives, arms crossed, face unreadable, crisp, short-sleeved shirt, dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that cut through the noise. Dr. Andrew Morales, my physician, my spine specialist, the only person who knew the truth of my injury better than I did. And that was the moment he cleared his throat and everything changed. Before that reunion shattered everything, my life had been a long stretch of days, defined by routines I once took for granted and now could barely manage. I had spent 10 years working as a registered nurse in Portland, the kind of job that demanded long shifts, quick thinking, and a strength I had always prided myself on. I loved it more than anything. I loved the patience, the organized chaos, the constant motion. I loved feeling needed, capable, purposeful. For a long time, those hospital hallways felt more like home than the house I grew up in. Then 18 months ago, a drunk driver ran a red light at an intersection I had crossed 1,000 times. I never even saw the truck until the metal collapsed inward like paper. I woke up on my back staring at hospital ceiling tiles, unable to move my right leg without tears spilling down my cheeks. The paramedics had told me later that nothing about the crash should have been survivable. Yet there I was, alive, broken in ways I did not yet understand. Months of rehabilitation followed. The doctors talked about my L4 and L5 vertebrae with expressions that made my stomach twist. Severe compression, partial nerve injury, long-term mobility limitations, words I had never imagined would apply to me. I was used to standing on my feet for 12-hour shifts and carrying heavy equipment without blinking. Now I needed help to sit up. The physical pain was sharp and ever-present, but what unsettled me most were the small moments that reminded me how far I had fallen. Dropping a cup because my grip slipped, standing for 2 minutes and collapsing into the nearest chair, feeling the shooting electric sensation burn down my leg each time I tried to take a step. The Olivia before the accident would have told patients it was normal to feel overwhelmed and scared, that healing was not linear, but living it was something else entirely. And my family did not understand. At first, they pretended they did, offering polite nods and stiff smiles whenever I mentioned physical therapy or nerve pain. But as the weeks stretched into months, their sympathy thinned until it barely existed. My father was the first to lose patience. He had always been someone who valued toughness above all else. In his mind, you pushed through pain. You did not talk about it. You did not need help. You certainly did not slow down. When I told him my neurologist recommended a wheelchair for long distances, he stared at me with something close to disgust. "You just like being the center of attention." That was his first accusation. The others followed quickly. He insisted I exaggerated my symptoms. He said the doctors were wrong or overreacting. He said the wheelchair was excessive and unnecessary. Logan fed all of this. He had always been the favorite child, the golden one, the success story. Everything came easily for him. Things fell in place. People liked him. My father admired him in the way fathers admire sons who resemble them too closely. After the accident, Logan began twisting every update I gave into something distorted. If I told him I could stand during therapy for a few minutes, he told my father I was walking in full laps. If I mentioned the shooting pain that came and went unpredictably, he told my cousins I intentionally collapsed for dramatic effect. Sometimes it felt like he was trying to erase the reality of my injury because it made him uncomfortable. Other times it felt like he enjoyed tearing me down. I wish I could say my mother defended me, but years of living under my father's dominance had taught her silence as a survival tactic. She wrung her hands. She apologized for him. She apologized for me, but she rarely stopped him, and she never stopped Logan. I tried explaining my condition in detail. I tried showing them printouts from my scans and medical notes. I even asked them to come with me to a therapy session so they could see how difficult walking had become. My father refused. Logan laughed. They did not want evidence that contradicted their assumptions. I had always been the daughter who stayed quiet and did not cause trouble, the nurse who handled everything gracefully, the sibling who made space for others. They did not know what to do with a version of me who needed support or patience or understanding. They wanted their old Olivia back, and since that was impossible, they reacted with frustration and blame. The household I had grown up in worsened everything. The Harper family had a reputation in our town for being polished, proper, picture perfect. My father loved nothing more than projecting stability and success. The idea that his daughter now required a wheelchair punctured that image. Instead of accepting it, he acted as though the injury itself were an inconvenience I had chosen to impose on him. I eventually moved out of the family home and into a small apartment closer to the hospital where my therapy sessions took place. The drive from my parents' house into Portland had become too long, too exhausting, too dangerous for my back. Relocating was a necessary decision one my doctors strongly encouraged, but my father saw it as betrayal. He accused me of abandoning the family. He told the relatives I wanted distance so I could continue my little act without anyone watching. Each time I heard his voice sharpen with disdain, something in me tightened. I started visiting them less. Phone calls became rare. I spent more hours in silence, letting my apartment become a safe place where I did not have to fight for my own truth. Yet a part of me still hoped things would get better. I remembered the father who taught me how to ride a bike. I remembered the teenage version of Logan who used to tease me playfully instead of cruelly. Those memories rose whenever I felt lonely, and then they crashed just as quickly when reality reminded me that those people no longer existed. Instead of healing emotionally, I became more isolated. Instead of feeling supported, I felt watched. And worst of all, instead of being believed by the two people who should have cared most, I felt like I was on trial every time I walked into their house. Still, despite the tension, I kept trying. I kept hoping my father might soften when he realized this injury was not temporary. I kept hoping Logan would see the truth for what it was. I kept hoping my family would see me. But every passing month only made the distance between us stretch wider, which is why when the invitation to the Harper family reunion arrived, my stomach knotted the moment I saw it. I knew exactly what it would be. Another stage, another round of scrutiny, another opportunity for them to call me a fraud. I declined the invitation 3 times. Each time, my father responded with more anger and more accusations. And yet somehow, despite everything, a small voice inside me wondered if maybe this time would be different. Maybe they would finally listen. Maybe they would finally understand. That hope was foolish. The months that followed the accident were filled with moments that chipped away at me piece by piece, not through loud explosions of conflict, but through countless small cuts that never had time to heal. The worst part was how normal it all seemed at first. Dad and Logan did not start by yelling. They started by doubting. Doubt is quieter, more insidious, easier for bystanders to overlook. It begins as a question, then turns into a pattern, then becomes a belief so deeply rooted that no amount of truth can pull it loose. My injury did not fit into the version of reality my father clung to. In his mind, people either got hurt and recovered fully, or they died. There was no middle ground. There was no such thing as long-term disability. There was no such thing as invisible pain. So when my doctors explained that nerve damage could last years or be permanent, he decided they did not know what they were talking about. When my physical therapist outlined how my mobility would fluctuate unpredictably, he dismissed it as exaggeration. The problem with my father was simple. He only believed what he wanted to believe, and Logan learned every one of his habits. Logan was already the golden child long before the accident. My father had spent years praising him as strong, practical, disciplined. When Logan applied to a business program, Dad bragged about it to anyone who would listen. When Logan bought his first car, Dad paid half the down payment and called it an investment in a real future. Meanwhile, I had built a stable career in nursing, worked brutal night shifts, and supported myself for years without asking either of them for anything. Yet none of that mattered. Dad admired people who looked unbreakable. Logan looked unbreakable, and that meant I looked weak by contrast. The power dynamic was clear. After the accident, it only intensified. Dad listened to every word Logan said, even when Logan's words were laced with sarcasm and contempt. At first, Logan's comments came across as teasing, the type of ribbing siblings trade when they do not understand how deeply certain jokes can cut. If I mentioned my leg gave out that morning, he would shrug and say, "Mine does that when I am tired too." If I described how my muscles locked up and sent shooting pain down my spine, he would respond that everyone gets stiff sometimes. If I refused to attend a family dinner because the drive would aggravate my back, he would laugh and tell everyone I was dramatic. But as time passed, the jokes stopped sounding like jokes. They started sounding like accusations. Every time I tried to explain my symptoms, Logan countered with something dismissive. "She just wants attention. She likes being taken care of. She does not want to go back to work. She is milking it. She always did like playing the victim." I heard each twist of the knife secondhand at first because Logan rarely delivered his sharpest words to my face. He preferred to spread them behind my back, knowing they would return to me eventually. It was strategic in its own twisted way. He could hurt me without risking a direct confrontation. Dad absorbed every single word. If Logan said he saw me walking more than usual, Dad repeated it as gospel. If Logan insisted I was standing upright for longer during therapy, Dad decided it must be true. If Logan claimed I exaggerated my pain, Dad hardened that claim into fact. The two of them formed a kind of echo chamber where doubt turned into certainty. My mother stayed silent as she always did. I wanted to resent her for it. Sometimes I did, but she had spent decades surviving under my father's temper, and survival had become her only instinct. Still watching her avert her gaze when Dad and Logan dismissed me felt like another kind of betrayal, softer, but no less painful. The worst moment came 3 months after my accident. I had just started using a walker during physical therapy, and my therapist asked me to take a few steps with her support. It was excruciating. Every inch felt like fire. Every shift of weight made my leg tremble uncontrollably. I focused on my breathing, on keeping my spine aligned, on ignoring the electric shocks shooting down to my ankle. I did not know Logan had followed me to the therapy center. He had shown up unannounced earlier that day, insisting on checking how I was doing. He acted kind, almost gentle, which should have been my first warning. I did not want him there, but he would not leave. When I finally gave in to his insistence and allowed him to accompany me inside, he disappeared the moment my therapist started explaining the session. I should have known he was up to something. I should have known curiosity would twist itself into cruelty. While my therapist was guiding me through a set of small, shaky steps, Logan stood behind a half-closed door phone lifted, recording everything. Later that night, he sent the video to our family group chat with the message, "Look, she walks perfectly fine." The video showed me walking with a walker, hunched, trembling, leaning heavily into my therapist, gasping in pain. But that was not how they saw it. They saw movement. They saw me upright. They saw what they wanted to see. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with messages. Dad wrote, "So you can walk after all." My aunt typed, "Guess she really was being dramatic." Another relative commented, "Maybe now she can stop playing that role." Logan recorded himself laughing in a follow-up message saying, "I told you all she was faking it." That night, I sat on my couch with my phone in my lap, shaking. I tried to delete the messages, but they kept coming. I turned off notifications, but my mind still heard the pings. I looked at the video again and again, hoping I would somehow see what they saw. Instead, I saw pain. I saw my face contorted. I saw my right leg collapsing inward. I saw the way my therapist kept her hand near my spine in case I fell. It should have been obvious. It should have been undeniable. But people who do not want to understand will always find a reason not to. From that day forward, Dad treated the video as irrefutable evidence that my disability was a lie. Each time I sat in my wheelchair, he glared. Each time I described a flare-up of pain, he sighed heavily. Each time I asked for help, he accused me of exaggerating. He told relatives I just did not want to grow up. He told neighbors I was manipulating the system. He told my mother that she was enabling my behavior. His disappointment settled into the walls of their house like mold. Everywhere I turned, there was another reminder of how far I had fallen in their eyes. That was when I began distancing myself emotionally. I visited less often. I stopped sharing medical updates. I avoided conversations where I knew their questions would turn into accusations. I focused on my treatments and my recovery, trying to build a life outside the suffocating expectations of my family. Yet even as I tried to separate myself, the echo of their doubt followed me. Each careless remark from Logan, each sharp comment from Dad, each silent glance from my mother deepened the invisible bruises. I kept telling myself I was stronger than their cruelty, that I could rise above it, that I could heal without their support. But the truth was more complicated. Their disbelief became a shadow that followed me through every appointment and every sleepless night. It is easier to endure pain when someone believes you. It is harder when the people you love insist you are choosing it. The emotional bruises built up long before the physical ones, and all of it, every unkind word and every careless sneer, became the groundwork for the blow that would eventually knock me out of my wheelchair in front of 40 relatives. The invitation to the Harper family reunion arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked inside a cream-colored envelope with my Aunt Miriam's neat handwriting on the front. I found it wedged halfway under my apartment door when I returned from a particularly painful physical therapy session. My first instinct was to ignore it. I dropped it on the kitchen counter and stared at it the way someone might stare at a bill they know they cannot pay. Part of me hoped it would disappear if I pretended it did not exist. But invitations from my family never disappeared. They always came with expectations, pressure, and consequences. When I finally opened it later that evening, the words were cheerful and bright, promising food, music, and togetherness. Celebrate the strength of the Harper family. Reconnect after a tough year. A photo of the backyard from last summer was printed in faded color beneath the message. In the picture, Logan had his arm around me and Dad was smiling in the background. The image felt like it belonged to someone else's life, someone who still fit into the Harper mold. Not me. Not anymore. My phone rang before I had the chance to toss the invitation aside. Dad's name flashed across the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I knew better. Ignoring him only made things worse. When I answered, his voice came through immediately sharp and demanding. "You got the invitation." It was not a question. "Yes," I said quietly. "Good. You are coming." I hesitated. "Dad, I do not think I should. My back has been bad this week and the drive might be too much. The reunion is important, Olivia. Our family needs to see that you are doing fine." He emphasized the word fine in a way that made my stomach twist. "And everyone knows you can walk when you want to." I closed my eyes. Store that video of Logan's had become a weapon Dad wielded whenever he needed to shut down my attempts to explain. It did not matter that the video showed me crying out in pain. All he focused on was the fact that my feet touched the ground. "Dad, the video does not show what you think it does." My therapist was holding me up the whole time. He cut me off. "You are coming. And if you do not, people will assume you are avoiding us because you were never really hurt." The accusation hung between us. The implication was clear. People will think you have something to hide. And he wanted that. He wanted the shame of refusing to show up to be worse than the pain of attending. I swallowed hard and said nothing. He continued speaking as if I had already agreed. "I expect you there at noon, and leave the attitude at home." The call ended before I could respond. I stared at my phone for a long moment, feeling the familiar heaviness settle in my chest. This was how it always went. Dad pushed. Logan mocked. Mom apologized on behalf of everyone. And I was the one who had to bend in order to keep the family from collapsing around their egos. That night, Mom called. Her voice was soft, trembling slightly the way it always was when she talked to me without Dad in the room. "Sweetheart, your father really wants you there." She paused. No, that was not quite right. "Your father needs you there, for appearances." She did not have to say the rest. Dad needed to show everyone that the Harper family was whole and functioning the image of perfection he had polished for decades. A daughter in a wheelchair shattered that image. A daughter who refused to show up shattered it even more. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling tension spread upward. "Mom, the last time I was at a family gathering, Logan joked about my gait for 20 minutes straight, and no one stopped him. I did." She responded quickly, but her voice faltered at the end. But I knew she had not. She had lowered her eyes the way she always did. I could still picture her wringing her hands while Logan grinned at me like he had discovered a new trick to play. I sighed. Mom, I do not think they will ever believe me. Her silence stretched through the line. Then she whispered, Please, just come, honey. For me. I do not want to be the only one trying to explain things. Just be there. Try to make your father proud. The last sentence hit me like a slow-moving punch. Make your father proud. Nothing I had done in the last decade had met that standard. Not my nursing career, not the education I had put myself through, not the fact that I had built my life on my own, and certainly not surviving a collision that should have killed me. But guilt is a powerful force, especially when it comes from a mother who has never learned how to want anything for herself. I promised I would think about it, which she took as a yes. The next few days were a storm of anxiety. I tried focusing on my physical therapy. I tried sleeping. I tried distracting myself with books and television, but everything I did was shadowed by the knowledge that I would eventually have to decide. With each hour that passed, the dread grew heavier. I pictured the reunion again and again, the way relatives would stare, the way Logan would smirk, the way Dad would watch my every movement like he was a detective searching for cracks in a lie. I thought about the uneven patio stones in my aunt's yard. I remembered how hard they were under my palms the last time I fell there. I imagined trying to maneuver my wheelchair across the grass while people whispered behind paper plates of food. My chest tightened every time my mind replayed those scenes. The night before the reunion, I sat on my bed staring at the wall. My wheelchair sat beside the nightstand. My walker leaned against the closet door. Both pieces of equipment reminded me of everything I had lost and everything people refused to understand. At some point, tears blurred my vision. I pressed my palms to my eyes and tried breathing through the panic. I told myself it was only one afternoon, only a few hours, only one more performance for the sake of keeping the peace. I knew better. It was not just an event. It was a test. It was a stage. It was a chance for Dad and Logan to push harder than they ever had before. A part of me screamed not to go. A part of me begged to avoid the humiliation and cruelty I knew would follow. But another part, the part conditioned by years of wanting to be loved by a man who had never learned how to show love, convinced me that maybe this time would be different. Maybe if I showed up. Maybe if I smiled. Maybe if I stayed quiet and polite. Maybe then they would finally believe I was not lying. That hope was thin, foolish, fragile, but it was the only hope I had. So the next morning I loaded my wheelchair into the back of my car. I double-checked my medication. I steadied my breath. And I began the drive to the reunion every mile, tightening the knot in my stomach as the sky stretched endlessly above me, indifferent to the storm building in my chest. The Harper reunion was already in full swing by the time I turned onto my Aunt Miriam's street, and the closer I drove, the tighter my grip became on the steering wheel. Cars lined both sides of the road. Children's voices echoed between the houses. Music drifted through the air, upbeat and cheerful in a way that felt painfully mismatched with the dread settling in my chest. When I parked 2 houses down, I sat still for a full minute trying to breathe past the tension in my ribs. I could already picture exactly how the afternoon would unfold. The looks, the whispers, the forced smiles, my father's disappointment simmering just beneath his expression, Logan's smirk waiting like a trap. I opened the door, carefully bracing myself as I lowered into my wheelchair. The motions were familiar, but slow. My back was stiff from the drive. My right leg tingled with the numb ache that warned I needed to move gently. I made my way toward the house, each push of the wheels, a reminder of everything my family chose not to understand. The sound of laughter grew louder as I approached the backyard gate. People were gathered around the patio, clustered in small groups with plates of burgers and chips and baked beans. The kind of American backyard scene that would have looked warm and comforting to anyone else. To me, it felt like walking directly into a spotlight I had not asked for. I rolled through the gate, hoping to slip in quietly, but Logan saw me immediately. He lifted his beer can high like he had spotted a celebrity and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look who finally made it! Rolling in with style." A few heads turned. A handful of cousins laughed awkwardly. My stomach dropped. Logan swaggered toward me, the sun glinting off the aluminum can in his hand. He wore a sleeveless shirt that showed off the gym muscles he constantly bragged about. His grin was wide and mean, an expression he reserved only for me. He looked me up and down theatrically. What happened? Liv Walker not dramatic enough for today. Had to bring the wheels. I did not answer. I knew better than to feed his cruelty. My Aunt Miriam approached then, wiping her hands on a dish towel, trying to appear welcoming. Olivia, you made it. Glad to have you here. She leaned down to kiss my cheek, but her eyes darted to my wheelchair with a flicker of disapproval she did not quite hide, as if simply existing in it was a disruption to her perfect event. I forced a small smile and rolled farther into the yard. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass. String lights hung along the fence despite it being broad daylight, a decorative choice my aunt insisted on for every reunion because she said it made things feel magical. There was nothing magical about the way people's gazes slid over me, lingered for a second, then shifted away as if looking too long was rude, but acknowledging me at all was even worse. My father stood near the grill spatula in hand, jaw tight. He watched me approach with a look I could not immediately decipher. Disappointment, annoyance, resentment. Probably all three. He did not greet me. He did not smile. He simply nodded once curt and cold, then returned his focus to the sizzling burgers as if flipping meat required the full extent of his attention. Mom hurried over a moment later, her expression already strained. She touched my shoulder lightly. I am glad you came, sweetie. Really glad. Her voice trembled not from happiness, but from the effort of keeping peace. Dad glanced over at us then and barked out a question. Can she at least sit at the table like everyone else, or does she need special accommodations? My throat tightened. Mom flinched. Logan grinned. I kept my voice steady. The wheelchair is fine, Dad. He scoffed loud enough for the relatives near the drinks table to hear. Of course it is. Convenient setup you have going. Logan snorted into his beer. I ignored them and wheeled myself toward the shade near the oak tree, hoping to blend into the background. But blending in was impossible. Everywhere I looked, eyes flicked away. People whispered behind hands. A young cousin stared openly at my legs until her mother gently pulled her aside. I felt like an exhibit, not a family member. I tried focusing on small details instead of the weight of the stairs. The humming of the country song coming from the portable speaker. The rustle of plastic tablecloths in the mild breeze, the clinking of ice as someone scooped drinks from the cooler. But Logan did not let me settle. He sauntered back over, leaning against the tree beside me, still riding the high of having an audience. So, Liv, he said loudly, how long are we keeping up the wheelchair act today? You walking by dinner or saving that for Christmas? Heat crept up my neck. Please stop, Logan, I murmured, but my quiet tone only emboldened him. He nudged one of my wheels with his foot like he was testing a toy he might break. Come on. Just stand up for a second. Prove to everyone you are at least trying. The words were casual but cruel. A few relatives watched from a distance. None approached. None intervened. My father walked over, then beer in hand, and stopped beside Logan. His shadow fell over me. His expression was stone. Stand up, Olivia. His voice was flat, commanding. The music continued playing behind us, but everything else went quiet. I swallowed hard. Dad, my therapist warned me. Not this again. He rolled his eyes. You can walk when you want to. Stop making a spectacle. This is not a spectacle, I whispered. But it was. It always was. Every family gathering turned into a public trial where my disability was the crime and my father was the judge. Logan stepped in closer. Seriously, Liv. Just try. Everyone is watching. I said nothing. My silence seemed to irritate Dad. He took a step forward, towering over me. If you are really hurt, why are you comfortable sitting here eating off our food and talking to people? You look pretty fine to me. I stared at the ground. My pulse quickened. My hands trembled on the wheels. That was when Logan crouched beside me, voice dripping with fake sympathy. If she does not try, Dad, maybe she knows she is lying. That single sentence ignited the spark in my father's expression. His jaw clenched, his face reddened. and in that moment I knew something was coming. Something worse than the usual words. He leaned down until his breath hit my cheek. "If you are telling the truth, then prove it right now." His tone carried both challenge and accusation. When I did not move, Logan gave a theatrical sigh, shook his head, and said loudly enough for half the yard to hear, "Guess she is doing the little victim routine again." A few cousins chuckled. Someone lifted their phone. Someone else whispered something that made a group turn to look at me. My cheeks burned. My throat tightened. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came out. My father raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Can you walk today, or are we doing this wheelchair thing again?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, and then he said the words that made my stomach drop. "If she is faking it, she deserves to be exposed." I gripped the wheels and quietly whispered, "Dad, please stop." But he didn't, and the humiliation had only just begun. My father's words were still hanging in the warm July air when he stepped in closer, his shadow swallowing what little space I had left to breathe. I could feel the tension shift across the backyard, a subtle but unmistakable pull, like the moment before a storm breaks. People sensed something was about to happen, but no one stepped in. No one moved. No one even pretended to intervene. They simply watched. My pulse thudded in my ears. My hands tightened around the rubber rims of my wheels. My right leg buzzed with the numb tingling that always came before a collapse. Logan folded his arms across his chest and smirked as if this were entertainment he had paid for. "Olivia, just stand up," Dad said again, slower this time, as if speaking to a stubborn child. His tone was not angry yet. It was worse. It was smug, confident. He believed wholeheartedly that if he pushed hard enough, I would rise to my feet and reveal the lie he thought I had spun. "Dad, please." My voice trembled. "My therapist said sudden pressure can make my balance slip." He snorted and took a long swallow of beer. "Balance slip. You act like taking a few steps is a death sentence." Logan laughed and added loudly, "To be fair, Dad, she has been practicing this routine for months." Some relatives chuckled. My stomach twisted. I could feel my breath shorten, my chest tightening as panic slowly coiled through me. Dad leaned forward. "Why do you insist on making everything about you? You are embarrassing your mother." That sentence hit harder than any physical blow. Humiliation washed over me in a hot wave. I looked toward Mom, but she barely met my eyes. Her hands were clasped together in front of her stomach, her shoulders hunched inward. She looked small, tired, terrified to say anything that might upset him. That hurt more than anything Logan could have said. Dad's voice rose. "You make us look like fools, Olivia, and I am done playing along." He moved before I even had time to prepare. He took one fast step toward me. His hand shot out. I thought he might grab me by the arm or yank the wheelchair forward, but he didn't. He lifted his hand higher and drove it down hard against the left armrest of my wheelchair. The impact echoed with a metallic crack that cut through the yard. The force traveled through the frame instantly. My chair jolted violently to the side. The left wheel skidded across the uneven patio bricks. I felt the world tilt. The ground rushed up at me before my brain could catch up. My shoulder hit first. Pain exploded through it. Then my hips struck the concrete so sharply the breath left my body. Finally, my head whipped sideways and clipped the ground with a blunt thud that sent my ears ringing. The sky blurred into white and blue streaks. Gasps scattered through the crowd. Not horror, not concern, just shock. Logan laughed, a short, loud bark of disbelief. And then he said exactly what I feared he would. "Told you she could move." His voice rang with triumph. Dad raised his hands defensively like he had done nothing wrong. She leaned too far. "Not my fault. She's always dramatic." I lay there, stunned, the world spinning hard and fast, the sun burning my eyes. I could taste dirt and the faint, sharp tang of blood where I had bitten my lip. My back screamed in protest. The nerves down my right leg fired uncontrollably, sending pulses of electric pain through my calf and ankle. My fingers scraped the cement, catching on rough gravel. I tried to inhale, but my ribs spasmed, trapping the air. Somewhere above me, someone said, "Is she okay?" The tone was uncertain, like they were not sure whether they should care or not. Dad answered quickly, "She is fine. She is always fine." A few people nodded. Someone muttered, "I mean, she fell, but she did not hit that hard." Another voice chimed in, "Maybe now she will admit she has been exaggerating." Their words blurred into each other. My own heartbeat was drowning out everything with its frantic rhythm. I tried to push myself up, but my arms trembled uselessly. My palms were scraped raw from the fall, and tiny pieces of gravel pressed into my skin. I blinked hard, trying to ground myself, trying to breathe through the flashes of pain. My ears were ringing so loudly I could barely hear the music anymore. Logan crouched down next to me, still smirking. "Come on, Liv. Show everyone those steps you have been hiding." His tone was light, taunting, cruel. I turned my head slightly and found myself staring at his shoes. The sight made my stomach twist. Something inside me cracked, then a small corner of hope I had held onto longer than I should have. My father stepped forward, towering over me. His voice boomed across the yard. "See? If she was really disabled, she would be in a hospital bed. She would be sedated. She would be hooked up to machines, not out here eating barbecue and pretending to be helpless." People murmured. Some nodded. Some looked uncomfortable, but not enough to speak. Not enough to help. Not enough to do anything but stare. I tasted bitterness in the back of my throat. Shame, anger, disbelief, pain. All of it swirled together into a suffocating fog. I pressed my trembling hands against the ground and tried once more to lift myself. My right leg gave out instantly. My hip buckled. My head spun. I braced myself for another wave of laughter. Instead, I heard a quiet, deliberate throat clearing behind the crowd. A sound so soft, only a few people reacted at first. Then more turned. Then more. The murmurs faded. The laughter died instantly. The entire backyard seemed to shift its axis. Dad's expression faltered. Logan froze mid-smirk. I blinked, trying to steady my focus. A silhouette emerged from the cluster of relatives near the folding tables. Dr. Rafael Morales. His arms were crossed over his chest. His expression was calm, controlled, cold in a way I had never seen before. His eyes were locked on my father. My pulse slowed just enough for his voice to land with total clarity. "Eric Harper, you just assaulted my patient." The backyard fell silent, and that silence was louder than any scream. For a second, no one moved. It was as if the entire yard had been frozen mid-breath. Dr. Morales stood at the edge of the patio, his posture still but powerful, like someone who had walked into a courtroom rather than a family barbecue. The sun lit the rims of his glasses, making it impossible to read his eyes, but I could feel the weight of his gaze bearing down on my father with surgical precision. Dad's mouth fell open, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. Logan straightened so fast he almost stumbled, the confidence draining from his face. Someone near the grill whispered, "Is that her doctor?" Another answered softly, "I think so." My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in the back of my skull. My arms trembled beneath me as I tried and failed to push myself upright again. The world was still spinning, but the ringing in my ears eased just enough for me to register what was happening. Dr. Morales took 3 slow, deliberate steps forward, each one measured and unhurried as if he knew the entire crowd was watching, but he had all the time in the world. The ease of his movements contrasted painfully with my struggle to even breathe comfortably. When he reached me, he crouched down, placing himself firmly between my father and me, creating a physical barrier that felt like a lifeline. "Olivia," he said quietly, voice gentle and steady. "Do not move. I am right here." I nodded faintly. My throat tightened. The calm in his tone was so different from the chaos swirling in my chest. He breathed out slowly, then turned his head toward the crowd, his voice rising just enough to command attention without shouting. "I need everyone here to listen carefully." His words sliced through the murmurs instantly. He looked directly at my father. "Eric, you struck the armrest of her wheelchair with enough force to destabilize it on uneven pavement. That is assault on a disabled person." The phrase hung heavy in the air. Dad's face reddened. He lifted a hand as if to wave off the accusation. I did not strike her. I barely touched it. She fell on her own because she always leans too far. That is not what happened. Dr. Morales's tone did not shift. It did not rise. It did not waver. It remained steady and factual the way I had heard him speak countless times in exam rooms. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his phone. Then he tapped the screen, turning it toward the crowd. I anticipated this. So, I recorded the entire interaction. Gasps rippled through the yard. Dad's jaw dropped. Logan swore under his breath. My heartbeat stuttered in my chest. I had not realized he had been filming, and for a split second, embarrassment surged through me at the thought of being captured on the ground. But then relief washed over me like warmth rising through cold water. Someone finally saw the truth. Dr. Morales pressed play. The video did not lie. It showed my father stepping forward, arm swinging downward, hand slamming into the wheelchair armrest with far more force than I had even realized in the moment. It captured the metal jolt, the wheel skidding, the instant the chair tipped, the impact of my fall, the laughter, the lines of disappointment carved across my father's face, the smirk on Logan's, the boredom on the faces of relatives who had watched it all unfold like it was backyard entertainment. As the video played, the previously cheerful chatter of the reunion died completely. The music from the speaker continued, but now it felt intrusive. Wrong too bright for the dark truth unveiling itself. Uncle Drew muttered, "My God, I did not realize." My cousin Ashley covered her mouth with her hand. A few people stepped back from my father as if his cruelty might rub off on them. Dr. Morales stopped the video after a few seconds, returned the phone to his pocket, and then addressed the entire family. Let me be perfectly clear. Olivia has permanent nerve damage. He spoke as if delivering a diagnosis directly to a medical panel. Not exaggeration, not emotional framing, pure fact. She suffered a severe L4 to L5 injury 18 months ago from a collision with a drunk driver. The damage is chronic and affects both her proprioception and her weight-bearing ability. She cannot safely stand without support. She cannot walk without mobility aids. She experiences neuropathic pain severe enough to collapse her leg with no warning. He swept his gaze across the patio, his expression controlled and clinical. Every physician involved in her care has documented this extensively. I am her primary rehabilitation specialist. I have personally overseen her treatment since week 4 post-injury. I have signed off on every evaluation, every imaging study, every mobility test, every treatment plan. Dad sputtered, "You are making this sound worse than it is." She was standing in therapy, walking. I saw it. Dr. Morales did not blink. That footage was from a physical therapy session. She was supported on both sides by trained medical staff. She managed 6 steps before her right leg gave out. That walking session was part of a controlled exercise. Not proof she can function independently. Logan stepped forward, voice cracking slightly. I mean, come on. She was walking at the store. I saw it. He sounded less confident than usual. Almost desperate. Dr. Morales turned his head slowly toward Logan. You saw her in the store. Walking, Logan swallowed hard. Well, yeah. I mean, she moved fast, definitely not struggling. Dr. Morales held his gaze. And did you speak to her? Ask her how she was feeling. Did you see her brace? Did you stay long enough to see her collapse afterward? Logan's mouth opened, then closed. No. I just saw her. At the end of the aisle. You assumed, Dr. Morales said. Without evidence, without understanding, without empathy. His tone sharpened. And you weaponized that assumption against her. Logan flinched. The crowd murmured again. Mom pressed both hands to her face, shoulders shaking. Dr. Morales turned back to my father. Eric, your daughter's condition is not a matter of opinion, nor is it up for debate. She is disabled. She lives with pain. She struggles every day, and today you made it exponentially worse. Dad's chest rose and fell quickly, but he could not seem to form any words. It was the first time I had ever seen him genuinely speechless. He glanced at the faces around him, searching for someone to take his side, someone to laugh it off with him, but no one met his eyes. Not a single person, Doctor. Morales looked at the small crowd again, this time more pointedly. For 18 months, Olivia has been gaslit, dismissed, mocked, and publicly humiliated by the people who should have protected her. His words were sharp, purposeful, unapologetic. I have witnessed the stress this has placed on her health. I have documented the psychological and physical impact of your disbelief. And now I have video evidence of what just happened here today. Dad's voice finally returned, but it cracked badly. You recorded me without permission. That is illegal. Dr. Morales shook his head calmly. In the state of Illinois, recording in a public space where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy is fully lawful. And this backyard during a public family event with 50 people present does not meet the criteria for privacy. Dad stepped back, face paling. Logan cursed under his breath again. Someone whispered, "He is right. He can record." Dr. Morales stood slowly, dusting dirt from his knee. Then he looked down at me. "Olivia, do not try to stand. I will assess your injuries shortly." Then he addressed everyone again, his tone firm and absolute. "After I examine her, the police will be contacted." Dad exploded. "What? You cannot call the police. This is family business." Dr. Morales met his rage with icy precision. "No, Eric. This is criminal assault on a disabled person, and I will not allow it to be swept under the rug." Silence followed. Heavy. Final. The kind of silence that changes everything it touches. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of the grill and the distant buzz of a lawnmower somewhere down the street, a normal suburban soundtrack that felt violently out of place against the scene unfolding in my aunt's backyard. My father stood rigid, jaw clenched, a pulse jumping visibly in his neck. His face had turned an alarming shade somewhere between red and gray. He looked like a man accustomed to holding absolute authority within his family, suddenly realizing that authority meant nothing to the person standing in front of him. Dr. Morales remained perfectly calm. His stance was steady, his tone unwavering, the very picture of controlled authority. He had not raised his voice once yet. Every word he spoke had carried more weight than any shouting match I had ever heard in this house. The family stared, unsure of how to react, torn between decades of conditioning to defer to my father and the undeniable fact staring them in the face. Evidence. Proof. Reality. Logan broke the silence first. "This is ridiculous." His voice cracked too thin to sound confident. "You do not have to make this a big deal. She is fine. Look at her." Dr. Morales turned his gaze toward him with precise steadiness. "Fine." He crouched down again, placing 2 fingers gently on the point between my shoulder and neck, pressing lightly. I gasped. Pain shot through me like a burst of electricity. Dr. Morales calmly addressed the crowd without breaking eye contact with Logan. She cannot even lift her own head without pain right now. But yes, she is perfectly fine. The sarcasm in his voice was cold and cutting. Logan recoiled slightly, the smirk gone for good now. My father seemed to finally regain the ability to speak. His voice came out low and furious. "You have no right to come here and humiliate me in front of my family." Dr. Morales straightened slowly, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a white business card. He held it calmly between 2 fingers. "I am not humiliating you, Eric. You did that yourself." He extended the card toward my father. "This is my attorney's information. You will be hearing from her." Dad did not take the card. He knocked it away with the back of his hand, sending it fluttering to the concrete. A few relatives gasped. One whispered, "Oh my God." Morales merely picked it back up, brushed it off, and held it to him again this time with a sharper edge in his gaze. "Refusing to take responsibility does not erase the consequences." My father's breathing grew heavier. "You think some lawyer is going to scare me? You think you can walk into my family's home and start threatening lawsuits?" The word threaten caught like a spark, igniting anger in the air. Dr. Morales did not flinch. "There are no threats here, only facts." He then held up his phone for everyone to see. "And evidence." He clicked a button. A video began playing. Not the fall this time, not the moment my wheelchair tipped, but everything that led up to it. Dad's hand hitting the armrest, the metal clanging, Logan laughing, the crowd murmuring, the comments, the accusations, the humiliation, the laughter, the chants. The fall replayed from a slightly different angle, captured by the reflection in someone's sunglasses. The image zoomed in automatically, my body hitting the concrete, my head snapping to the side, people gasping, Logan smirking, Dad stepping back without a hint of concern. My mother's horrified expression. The audio was devastating. She is fine. She is dramatic. She is faking it. Told you she could move. This is all an act. This is family business. Turn it off. Dad snapped, voice shaking now. Turn it off. Dr. Morales obliged, but not to comfort him. He paused the video on the exact frame of my fall, blown up large enough that every detail was impossible to ignore. Then he held up the phone so everyone could see the photo clearly. Her fall was not an accident. His tone remained clinical. This was caused by force, a deliberate strike meant to destabilize her. Dad's face twisted in anger. That is not true. I never hit her. You saw the video. Dr. Morales responded calmly. We all saw the video. Several relatives nodded reluctantly. Others looked horrified. My cousin Sarah whispered, I thought she tripped. I thought she just fell wrong. Aunt Miriam pressed her hand to her chest. I did not realize. I had no idea it was like that, as if ignorance absolved her, as if not watching closely meant she was innocent. Dr. Morales scanned the faces. Everyone here has just witnessed what happens when a disabled person is repeatedly harassed, disbelieved, mocked, and publicly shamed. His voice carried over the patio like a verdict. And you all stood by. Silence fell again, heavy, suffocating. My father's hands curled into fists at his sides. His voice shook with barely contained fury. You come into my home. You call me an abuser. You show videos like I am some kind of monster. You think she is helpless? You are enabling her. Dr. Morales didn't even blink. Of course she is not helpless, he said. She is resilient and intelligent and working harder than any of you realize. But right now she is injured, and the person who injured her is you. That was the breaking point. Something inside Dad snapped. He stepped forward aggressively, chest puffed like he was ready to fight the man who dared to expose him. A few relatives instinctively stepped backward. Mom gasped. Logan moved in closer, as if he intended to support Dad physically, but Dr. Morales stood tall, calm, immovable. His voice lowered to a quiet warning. Eric, one more step toward me and this becomes an arrestable situation, even before the police arrive. That stopped my father cold. The color drained from his face. The crowd's unease deepened. Someone whispered, He is right. You cannot touch him. Not after that video. Another murmured, We will all be witnesses. For a moment, Dad looked like a trapped animal cornered by his own behavior. He stared around wildly, seeking anyone to confirm his version of events. But no one stepped forward. Not a soul. Dr. Morales turned to my mother then. Mrs. Harper, Olivia needs her wheelchair uprighted and possibly an ambulance. Mom let out a small choked sound. She moved quickly to the tipped chair, hands trembling as she lifted it back into position. Her tears dripped onto the seat cushion. I am so sorry, sweetheart. I am so sorry. Dad barked. Do not apologize to her. Then he pointed at me on the ground. She has ruined this entire day. Dr. Morales' voice cut across the yard like a blade. No, Eric. You did. The finality in his tone was absolute, inescapable. Then he said the sentence that made every relative stiffen. The police are already on their way. Dad spun toward him. What I did not hear you call anyone. Dr. Morales slipped his phone back into his pocket. I did not have to call. One of your neighbors did. Everyone's eyes shifted toward the back fence. A woman stood just outside the gate holding her phone. She wore a horrified expression that suggested she had heard everything. She spoke timidly. I I heard yelling and someone falling. So I called. I thought someone was hurt. I did not know. I am so sorry. Dad's expression fell apart, then panic seeping into the cracks of his anger. Logan cursed loudly. The entire yard buzzed with tension. Dr. Morales crouched beside me again and placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. Olivia, stay still. Help is coming. Then he rose, slowly faced my father, and delivered the final blow. Today, you tried to prove she was faking her disability. Instead, you proved exactly who you are. The police arrived faster than anyone expected. The distant wail of sirens grew louder until they cut abruptly at the curb in front of my aunt's house. Conversations died mid-sentence. The children who had been running through sprinklers stopped and stared. A few relatives stepped back instinctively, as if proximity alone might make them complicit. 2 officers entered the backyard through the side gate, their expressions composed and professional. The moment they saw me on the ground and the overturned wheelchair beside me, their posture shifted. Concern first, then caution, then assessment. One of them, Officer Ramirez, approached slowly and knelt beside me. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" His voice was gentle, practiced calm. My throat tightened. I opened my mouth, but before I could form the words, Dr. Morales stepped forward with the authority of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Officers, my name is Dr. Rafael Morales. I am this woman's rehabilitation specialist and primary physician for her injury." He handed over a small stack of documents he had prepared ahead of time, as though he had known from the beginning that this confrontation would end exactly like this. "She is a disabled patient with documented L4 and L5 nerve damage, significant proprioception loss, and mobility limitations that make her susceptible to collapse." Officer Ramirez skimmed the paperwork quickly, his brows lifting slightly. He looked up. "And the injury today," Dr. Morales nodded toward my father. "Caused by him. In front of approximately 40 witnesses." Logan scoffed. "This is insane. She fell on her own." Dad muttered something under his breath that sounded like ridiculous. Dr. Morales calmly removed his phone from his pocket. "I recorded the incident. Video evidence on site." He held the phone out. The officers watched. The entire yard remained silent as the footage replayed the hit, the chair jolting my body, tipping violently, the impact with the concrete, the laughter after. The officers' expressions hardened. Officer Ramirez exhaled slowly as the video ended. He turned toward my father. "Sir, I need you to stand where I can see your hands." Dad's face twisted. "Wait. Hold on. You do not understand. It was an accident. I did not push her. You hit the wheelchair." The officer's tone did not waver. "You caused her to fall. That is assault." Dad raised his voice. "I barely touched her. She dramatizes everything." Officer Ramirez remained unmoved. "Multiple witnesses confirm otherwise, and the video corroborates it." Dad glanced frantically at the relatives around him, but none of them stepped forward. Not one. For the first time in my life, he looked small. Truly small. His authority, the force he always relied on, evaporated. The second officer stepped closer and asked my mother quietly, "Ma'am, did you see what happened?" Mom's voice shook. "Yes." She did not elaborate. She did not attempt to defend him. She simply stared at the ground, tears gathering along her lashes. The officer nodded and turned back to my father. "Sir, place your hands behind your back." Dad's voice cracked. "You cannot arrest me. This is my house. My family. You do not get to walk in here and treat me like a criminal." But the officer was already pulling cuffs from his belt. "You assaulted a disabled woman. That is a criminal offense anywhere in this country." Dad looked at me then. Really looked. And for a flicker of a second, I thought I saw something human in his eyes. Fear, anger, shame. I could not tell which. Then it vanished. "Olivia, tell them it was an accident." His voice shook with desperation. "Tell them you slipped. Tell them you leaned too far like you always do." My heart thudded painfully. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Not because I was unsure, not because I doubted the truth, but because there was nothing left to say. I did not owe him protection. Not anymore. Officer Ramirez repeated firmly, "Hands behind your back now." Dad froze. Logan stepped forward as if he could physically block the officers. "This is insane. She is faking it. Ask anyone. She has been lying for years. Ask them." He gestured wildly at the crowd, but no one said a word. No nods of agreement, no murmurs of support. Silence stretched across the yard like a verdict. Finally, Logan's voice cracked. "You all saw her walking. You all know she can. You all know she is manipulating us." No one responded. His certainty crumbled in front of him. Dad finally placed his hands behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was sharp and final. My mother let out a choked sob. Several relatives turned away. Others stared openly. A few whispered. One of the officers glanced toward my Aunt Miriam. "Someone needs to gather her identification and any personal items she may need." Miriam nodded numbly and moved toward the house. Everything felt surreal, like watching a movie of my own life, rather than living it. I lay there, breath-shallow limbs trembling, while the police guided my father toward the gate. Logan followed closely behind, still arguing, even though no one was listening. "This is blown way out of proportion. You are making a mistake." "She is fine. Ask her. She is fine." The officer leading my father stopped and looked at Logan with steady authority. "Son, you need to step back or you will be next." Logan's mouth snapped shut. They escorted my father out of the yard. The guests parted like water splitting around a rock. No one reached out to him. No one touched his shoulder. No one told him it would be okay. The moment they passed through the gate, the backyard was left in a heavy, stunned quiet. Dr. Morales knelt beside me again. "Olivia, can you lift your head for me slowly and with my help?" His tone was gentle, but the concern beneath it was unmistakable. I tried to move, but pain shot through my hip and shoulder. I winced. He nodded. "Do not force it. I am calling for an ambulance. You may have a concussion and you definitely need imaging." Mom knelt beside him, wiping her face with trembling hands. "I am sorry, honey. I am so sorry." Her voice cracked. I did not know he would. I just wanted him to listen. I wanted him to be proud. I stared at her. She was crying so hard she could barely speak, but she had watched this build for months. She had watched every dismissal, every jab, every lie, and she had said nothing until now. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to say something kind, but all that came out was a quiet, hoarse whisper. "I know, Mom." She bowed her head. The sirens of the approaching ambulance grew louder. Dr. Morales placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "They will take you to the hospital. I will meet you there." "Do not worry. You are safe now." Safe. It felt strange hearing that word said out loud. Strange and fragile. The paramedics pushed through the gate moments later. As they moved toward me with their equipment carefully assessing my injuries, lifting me with practiced precision onto the stretcher, the last thing I saw before they wheeled me out was Logan standing alone near the back fence, staring at the ground, his face pale with something that looked very close to fear. The ambulance ride felt strangely quiet, despite the hum of the engine and the soft beeping of the equipment around me. The paramedics exchanged calm, efficient words as they worked, but my mind drifted in and out of focus. The world outside the window blurred into streaks of green and blue, and every bump in the road sent a dull ache rippling through my shoulder and down my spine. I tried to breathe slowly the way Dr. Morales always reminded me to during flare-ups, but my body kept trembling. It was not just the pain. It was everything. The humiliation, the shock, the sight of my father being taken away in handcuffs, the weight of 18 months of disbelief crashing down in one catastrophic moment. By the time we reached the hospital, my thoughts were scattered and raw. The paramedics wheeled me through the automatic doors. The bright fluorescent lights of the ER made my eyes water. Nurses called out instructions, charts exchanged hands, monitors beeped. I had spent a decade working in hospitals caring for others walking these very hallways in scrubs. But now I was the one being examined, lifted, documented, treated, vulnerable in a way that still felt foreign to me. A young nurse guided the stretcher into a private exam room, her voice soft as she asked questions for the intake form. "Do you have any allergies?" Are you currently on medication on a pain scale of 1 to 10? How would you rate your discomfort? I answered each question automatically, as though reciting lines from a script I had memorized through my years in the medical field. Once the initial evaluations were done, they sent me for imaging. The cold surface of the X-ray table stiffened my muscles instantly. Every shift of my body sent a new wave of pain radiating through my hip and back. The technician apologized each time he asked me to adjust my position. He must have sensed the tremor in my breathing. When it was over, they wheeled me back to my room and dimmed the lights. Only then did the sharp edges of everything that had happened begin to settle into something I could process. Morales arrived 20 minutes later, still in the same polo and slacks he had worn to the reunion, but now with a hospital badge clipped to his belt and a seriousness in his expression that made my throat tighten. He pulled up a chair beside my bed. "How are you feeling?" His voice was gentle but steady. "Safe," I whispered, surprising myself. "And tired." He nodded. "Understandable. They will give you something for the pain as soon as the imaging results come through." I expected him to explain everything clinically, to list the potential injuries, to talk through treatment plans the way he always did. But instead, he stayed quiet for a moment, studying me, with an expression that held both concern and something like sorrow. "I am sorry you had to go through that today," he said. My chest tightened. The sympathy in his voice hit harder than the fall itself. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to me with genuine care. "Thank you for being there," I managed. His jaw tightened slightly. "I told you months ago I would come to the reunion if you ever needed an advocate. You did not need to ask. You should not have needed to ask." He exhaled slowly, eyes lowering for a brief moment. "What your father and brother have done to you is not normal, Olivia. It is not family conflict. It is abuse." Hearing the words spoken aloud made my stomach twist. I had spent so long trying to frame everything as misunderstandings, or miscommunications, or stubborn opinions. But abuse. The truth of it settled heavily on my chest. A nurse entered then with a small cup of medication and a chart in hand. She checked my vitals, gave me something for the pain, and left the room as quietly as she had come. Slowly, the edges of my pain dulled. The room softened. My breathing eased for the first time since the fall. When the imaging results came back, Dr. Morales returned with the attending physician, Dr. Patel, a woman with kind eyes and a sharp, efficient demeanor. They explained everything in careful detail. A mild concussion, a strained shoulder, significant bruising along my right hip. No fractures, thankfully, but the fall had worsened the nerve inflammation, meaning my mobility would be even more limited for the next several weeks. Dr. Patel spoke plainly. "If the force had been just a little more angled, you could have damaged the fusion site in your spine. You were very lucky." Lucky did not feel like the right word. Not today. After she left, Dr. Morales stayed. He sat beside my bed, arms crossed lightly, watching the monitors as if making sure they would not betray me. Eventually, he said, "I want you to consider something. My insurance is covering your immediate treatment. But you have a right to pursue longer-term support, legal support, emotional support, protection." I swallowed hard. I knew what he was hinting at. A restraining order, charges, court. I was not sure I had the strength for any of it. My mother appeared in the doorway, then her eyes red and swollen. She hesitated before entering, clutching her purse in both hands like a shield. "Sweetheart," she whispered. The moment she saw me hooked up to the monitors, her face collapsed. Tears streamed freely. "I am so sorry. I failed you." She broke down completely. Dr. Morales quietly excused himself to give us privacy. Mom sat in the chair he had used moments earlier and took my hand with trembling fingers. "I should have stopped him. I should have spoken up. I should have protected you." I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me. "Mom, you were scared of him too." She sobbed harder. "That is not an excuse. You are my daughter, and I let you suffer because I was afraid of making him angry." I squeezed her hand gently. "I do not want your guilt. I want you to choose me now." She nodded, tears streaming unchecked. "I am choosing you. I am here. I am not leaving." True to her word, she stayed for hours. She held my hand through the pain spikes. She apologized again and again until I finally told her to stop. When she stepped out to get food, Dr. Morales returned carrying a folder. Inside were resources for trauma counseling information about disability rights and detailed reports he had prepared documenting the progression of my injury. "Counseling will help you process what has happened," he said softly. "Trauma from family is different. It rewrites parts of you if you do not address it." I knew he was right, and for the first time I felt ready to try. Over the next days, my treatment continued. Physical therapy resumed with modifications. A hospital psychologist met with me to assess the emotional toll. Each session dredged up painful memories, but speaking the truth out loud felt like slowly untangling a knot that had tightened in my chest for far too long. Healing was not linear. Some mornings I woke with hope, others with dread. Some afternoons I cried without knowing why. But each day I reclaimed a tiny piece of myself. On the 5th day, Dr. Morales stopped by before my discharge. He handed me a simple form. "This is a victim's statement. The police will need your signature before they finalize charges." My hand trembled slightly as I reached for a pen. I hesitated only a moment. Then I signed. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to punish, but because I wanted an end, a boundary, a truth recognized. That was the first moment I felt like healing had truly begun. The weeks following my discharge felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful exactly, but suspended like the air just before a storm breaks again. My days became a rotation of physical therapy counseling sessions, follow-up appointments with Dr. Morales, and long, silent hours where I tried to relearn how to exist without the weight of my father's voice in my head. Healing is not a straight line. Some mornings I woke up feeling strong, almost steady, as if my body were finally beginning to trust itself again. Other mornings I struggled to get out of bed, overwhelmed by the echo of everything that had happened in that backyard. During therapy, my muscles would tremble, my hip would flare with electric pain, and the therapist would remind me gently that progress was measured in inches, not miles. Still, little by little, I felt something shifting inside me, a steadiness growing where fear used to live. Then came the first unexpected visitor. Logan showed up at my apartment 3 weeks after the reunion without calling first. I spotted him through the peephole standing stiffly in the hallway, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders tense. For a long moment, I simply stared at the distorted outline of him. My chest tightened. The last time I had seen him, he was yelling at the officers, insisting I was faking everything. I opened the door halfway, leaving the chain locked. He swallowed hard when he saw me. "Hey, Liv." His voice was weaker than I had ever heard it. I didn't answer. He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to check on you." "You don't need to," I said. He looked down at his shoes. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." He exhaled slowly. "Look, I know everyone is mad at me right now. The police talked to me. Work suspended me. Friends won't pick up their phones. People keep sending me articles about what happened. They're calling me a bully, a monster, a piece of trash. It's like my whole life fell apart overnight." I watched him, waiting. He rubbed his face with both hands. "This is the part where you want sympathy, isn't it?" He flinched. "No, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I just wanted to say sorry." His apology felt thin, surface level, too rehearsed. "Sorry for what I asked, for what happened." "What part of it?" His jaw tightened. "For the yelling, for the video, for the stupid comments." He hesitated before adding, "And for pushing you." "You mean for mocking me for 18 months, for calling me a liar, for telling Dad I was pretending, for humiliating me in front of the entire family?" His gaze dropped again. And for that, too. His confession was incomplete. He was apologizing for getting caught, not for what he'd done. I quietly closed the door. The latch clicked. He didn't knock again. 2 days later, Mom called to tell me Dad wanted to see me. "He's miserable, Olivia. The court hearings are starting. He could lose his job. The neighbors are talking. The whole town is talking." "Of course they're talking, Mom. He assaulted his daughter." She winced. Her voice cracked. "I know, but he's your father. He's suffering. He wants to talk. He wants you to drop the charges." My jaw tightened. "No." Her breath caught. "Olivia, please. He's not well. You can't just let this happen to him." But I could, and I had to, because he had never hesitated to let terrible things happen to me. Mom's voice climbed in pitch. "He said he didn't mean it. He said he was just frustrated. Frustrated enough to knock me out of a wheelchair," I said sharply. She fell silent. I remembered all the times she'd whispered excuses for him over the years. "He's tired. He had a hard day at work. He didn't mean what he said. He's under stress." And then, something cold and clear moved through me. A truth I had avoided for years. "Mom," I whispered, "you can love him. You can forgive him. You can stand beside him if you want." "But I won't. Not anymore." Her breath broke into sobs. "You're breaking this family." "No," I said quietly. "The family was broken long before me. I'm just done pretending it isn't." She hung up. The next week, the charges against my father were formally filed. Assault, disorderly conduct, abuse of a disabled person. The last one carried enhanced penalties. The prosecutor explained it plainly. He didn't just hurt you. He targeted someone he knew was physically vulnerable. The trial date was set for late fall. My father hired a lawyer who immediately tried reaching out to me, urging me to reconsider my statement. I never responded. Then came the second unexpected shift. Logan was fired from his job. His boss cited workplace safety policies and said they could not employ someone publicly known for mistreating a disabled family member. His girlfriend left him. His friends stopped inviting him anywhere. He moved back in with my mother temporarily, though she never said so outright. But I could hear it in the way her voice shook every time she mentioned home. That house was crumbling from the inside out, and none of it was my fault. The real turning point came 1 month later at the grocery store. I was near the pharmacy aisle practicing slow supported steps with my cane when a woman in her 50s approached me shyly. "Excuse me, are you Olivia Harper?" I hesitated. "Yes." She looked emotional. "I saw the video. What your family did to you." "I'm so sorry." I wanted to cry. Instead, I just nodded. "Thank you." She squeezed my hand. "People like us need to see someone stand up to abuse. It gives the rest of us courage." Her words struck something deep inside me. People like us. People who lived with invisible pain. People who were doubted, dismissed, minimized. People who were told they were dramatic or lazy or difficult instead of sick or healing or tired. I cried the moment she walked away. Not out of sadness, but relief. The world was bigger than my family, bigger than their cruelty, bigger than their disbelief. I wasn't alone. A week later, an email arrived from the Illinois Disability Rights Network. They had heard about my case. They wanted me to speak at a community event. Not big, not televised, just a room of people affected by disability discrimination. At first, I almost said no. I wasn't ready. I wasn't brave. I wasn't healed. But healing was not a requirement for telling the truth. So I said yes. The day of the event, I rolled up to the community center with Dr. Morales beside me. His presence was grounding like always. Inside the room was filled with people in wheelchairs, people with canes, people with scars, people with tremors, people whose pain lived beneath the surface where ignorant eyes refused to see it. I told my story. The accident, the nerve damage, the disbelief, the gaslighting, the humiliation, the fall, the arrest, the aftermath. My voice shook at first, but soon steadied. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then applause broke out like a wave. People stood. People cried. A woman my age came up afterward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My husband says I'm exaggerating my pain," she whispered. "Your story, it made me feel less alone." I squeezed her hands. "You matter. Your pain matters. Don't let anyone rewrite your reality." When she hugged me, something in my chest finally loosened. I wasn't the girl lying on the concrete anymore. I wasn't the burden, or the liar, or the disappointment. I was something else now. Something stronger. Later that evening, Dr. Morales wheeled me to the parking lot. "You did well today." His voice was warm. I smiled faintly. I didn't think I could do it. You didn't think you could survive the last 18 months either, but you did." His words settled around me like armor. As he helped me into the car, he paused. "You know, redemption takes many forms. Sometimes it isn't theirs. Sometimes it's yours." I looked at him. I think I'm finally starting to understand that. And as the sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, painting the buildings gold, I realized he was right. My father's redemption was not my responsibility. Logan's wasn't either. The only redemption I needed was my own. The morning of the Disability Rights Conference arrived with a crispness in the air that felt symbolic, like the world itself had been rinsed clean and reset overnight. I woke before my alarm, lying still for a moment in the quiet of my apartment, feeling the low hum of anxiety mixing strangely with something steadier beneath it. Not confidence exactly, but clarity. For the first time in a long while, I didn't wake dreading what my father might say, or what Logan might accuse me of, or whether my pain would be dismissed again. Today wasn't about them. Today was about truth. My truth. Dr. Morales arrived as he always did, punctual to the minute, carrying a thermos of chamomile tea he claimed would help my nerves. He helped me into my wheelchair, checked the cushions, tightened the brakes with the casual familiarity of someone who had done it 1,000 times and then loaded everything into his car. The drive to the event center was quiet. Not tense, just thoughtful. The city stretched around us, reflective glass, soft morning sunlight. Early joggers, coffee shops opening their doors. It felt almost ordinary, but nothing about this moment was ordinary for me. When we arrived, volunteers greeted us with warm smiles. Their faces, some lined with age, others young and eager, carried the same quiet strength I had begun recognizing in people who lived with invisible battles. The event hall was larger than I expected, decorated simply with banners displaying phrases like, "Visibility matters," and "Your story deserves space." As I entered, a few people looked up and whispered to each other, not with pity, but recognition. Several approached immediately, thanking me for agreeing to speak, telling me they had followed my case online. I felt a strange mixture of humility and disbelief each time someone said my name, like I had done something significant. After months of feeling small, it was overwhelming to realize people saw me differently now. Not as a burden, not as the dramatic daughter, not as the girl who refused to walk, but as someone who had survived something difficult and finally said enough. When it was time for my panel, an older woman with snow-white hair introduced me to the crowd. Her voice carried a gentle power as she said, "We are honored to welcome someone whose story exposed painful truths about family abuse, disability discrimination, and the importance of believing survivors. Please join me in welcoming Olivia Harper." The applause swelled and rolled like a warm wave. My hands trembled slightly on the armrests of my wheelchair, but I steadied myself. As I reached the podium, I inhaled slowly. Then I told the truth. All of it. The accident, the nerve damage, the disbelief, the jokes, the videos, the manipulation, the reunion, the hit, the fall, the concrete, the silence, the arrest, the isolation, the rebuilding. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't soften it. I didn't excuse it. I spoke it plainly, clearly, exactly as it happened. And the room listened, really listened. No one rolled their eyes. No one questioned the severity of my pain. No one suggested I was imagining it or exaggerating it or using it for attention. They listened like the truth mattered. My voice wavered only once when I described looking up from the ground after the fall and seeing the sky blur through tears as my father called me a faker in front of everyone. Shame has a way of embedding itself deep inside the bones, but speaking it out loud unravels it thread by painful thread. When I finished, there was no immediate applause. Just a full second of stillness, like the room was absorbing the weight of the story. Then the standing ovation came. People rose from their chairs, some wiping their eyes, some clapping fiercely, some nodding at me with solidarity so deep it felt like a lifeline. Afterward, people lined up to speak with me. A man in his 60s told me his son had MS and still struggled to get his workplace to accommodate him. A teenage girl confessed she had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and her parents insisted she was lazy. A mother said her child's school accused her of faking seizures until she collapsed in class. Every person carried a story, and every story echoed pieces of mine. A woman with short auburn hair and a soft voice approached next. She hesitated before speaking. "Your story saved me," she whispered. I blinked. "What do you mean?" Her eyes filled. "My husband tells me I exaggerate my flare-ups. He says I use my disability to avoid chores. I believed him for years. But when I saw your video, I realized I wasn't alone. I filed for a protection order last week. Hearing that opened something in me I didn't know was still locked. After the event, Dr. Morales pushed my chair toward the exit. "You did more than speak today," he said quietly. "You gave people permission to name what's hurting them." I exhaled slowly. "That means more to me than anything." He smiled. "You earned it." My healing continued in the weeks that followed. Therapy sessions grew deeper. Physical rehab became more manageable. I learned to trust my body's limits, not fight them. My world slowly reshaped itself around people who believed me, people who valued me, people who protected me, not because they felt obligated, but because they cared. The court date eventually arrived. My father appeared in a gray suit that hung loosely on him, his hair unkempt, his jaw clenched with bitterness. Logan sat beside him, shoulders rigid, his gaze fixed on the courtroom floor. I felt fear at first seeing them again, but it wasn't the fear of a helpless daughter anymore. It was the fear of confronting an old version of myself I had already outgrown. I wasn't the Olivia who cried silently when they doubted my pain, or the Olivia who tried desperately to make them believe her, or the Olivia who apologized for existing. I was someone else now, someone who spoke at conferences, someone who inspired others to take action, someone who survived. My father pled guilty to avoid trial. The judge handed down the sentence with firm, unwavering words: probation, mandatory anger, management counseling, community service hours dedicated to disability advocacy organizations, and a no-contact order protecting me indefinitely. As the courtroom emptied, Dad turned once as if expecting me to come to him, to soften, to forgive, to behave like the daughter he had spent his life shaping. I didn't move. He looked away first. Logan left without looking back at all. Months later, during an evening support group meeting, a new member approached me. She was younger than me, with tired eyes and a nervous smile. "I heard your story online," she said. "It gave me the courage to leave my parents' house." I nodded gently. "You deserve safety." "We all do." She hesitated. "How did you find closure after everything I thought about it? About the fall, the humiliation, the disbelief, the slow climb back to myself, about the applause, the woman whose life changed, the moment I realized I wasn't alone." Closure didn't come from their apologies, or their consequences, or the court hearings. Closure came from something else entirely. I said I stopped trying to make them believe me, and I started believing myself. She cried softly. I hugged her. That night, as I drove home with the city lights shimmering through the windows, I felt something settle into place inside me. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but peace. The kind that comes from reclaiming the narrative of your life. The kind that comes from speaking truth into places that once silenced you. The kind that comes from finally understanding your worth. He hit my wheelchair to prove I was faking. But in the end, that moment proved something entirely different. I never needed their belief to stand tall. I only needed my own. The truth had set me free. If you've ever been silenced by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever been told your pain was imaginary, or your fear was exaggerated, or your story was inconvenient, then you already understand what it took for me to sit here today and tell mine. Maybe you've lived years carrying invisible injuries. Maybe someone you loved called you dramatic or weak or attention-seeking. Maybe your family taught you to swallow your truth just to keep the peace. But here's what I learned and what I want you to take with you long after this story ends. Your pain is real. Your voice matters. And anyone who tries to convince you otherwise is afraid of what your truth will expose. I spent 18 months trying to make people believe me. I begged. I explained. I justified. I minimized my own suffering because the people I loved were more comfortable with a lie than the truth. But healing didn't begin until the day I stopped chasing their validation and finally stood in my own. If you've ever been laughed at while you were hurting, if you've ever been pushed aside, pushed down, or pushed to your limit by the very people who should have lifted you up, I want you to know this. You are not alone. You are not imagining it, and you are not the problem. Every time someone shares their story, another person finds the courage to face their own. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching right now needed to hear this more than they needed anything else today. So let me ask you the question I wish someone had asked me years ago. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who thought they owned your voice? If this story resonated with you, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And more importantly, tell me what part of this story hit you the hardest. Your voice belongs here. Your truth belongs here. And if you've ever been dismissed, doubted, or told to stay quiet, drop a comment and reclaim it now.